Hey everyone, it's Leigh with Arts Council OKC Creative Aging Program. And today we're going to do a fall watercolor, fake stained glass with embossing powder. I thought, since fall is coming, it's here, it would be nice to do some stylized fall images that kind of look like stained glass. And we're going to use embossing powder, which, if you're a craft, like a scrapbookery probably, or a card maker, are familiar with it. So your materials you're going to need are number 2 pencil, watercolor paper, watercolors, embossing pens, embossing powder, paintbrushes of various sizes, paper towels for blotting, water, and a heat gun, because a heat gun is what you're going to need for the embossing powder. Well, all right, let's get started. All right. Okay, there we go. Oops, there we go. Okay. So today I've already, let's see, I'll set this over here. So basically we're going to start, I've got a couple of other images that I've already drawn out, but this kind of gives you an idea. What I did is I went online and I actually found images of stained glass that I liked, fall stained glass. Now you can take any image, fall image that you want, and you can kind of make it to look like stained glass. The embossing powder we're using today is silver, because that really lends itself to looking like the leading in stained glass. So what I've done is I'm going to start with an image that I did that, pumpkins. And I'm using, this is an embossing pen, and you can get the embossing pens and powders pretty much at any art supply place, in the scrapbooking area. So I'm using the black pen today just because it's easier for you all to see. And I just kind of broke it down into really simple shapes. So I've got a couple of pumpkins here and a few leaves, and I'm going to go ahead and use the embossing pen and go ahead and outline it. Now remember, with the embossing pen, this is actually, the embossing powder is going to stick to it. So whatever is black is actually going to turn silver. So if you really like nice, thick leading lines for your stained glass, then you can go in and make your lines a little thicker, okay? And you don't have to cram down really hard on the end of the pen because it doesn't like it, so just take your time. So I'm gonna do all of the stuff in the center here first. Well, these are the edges actually, but I'll do my outline later. So just kind of, you can have some fatter lines and some thinner lines. It doesn't matter. But I thought pumpkins would be a nice thing for fall. And I'm a fan of really stylized images, and I like stained glass too. So I thought this would be kind of a fun little fall project. So, and then another thing you want to be careful of when you're actually doing the embossing pen, your lines on here, you try not to drag your hand across it, because the oils on your hand can actually affect how the where the embossing powder actually sticks to. Because if you get your hand oils all over it, it will sometimes want to stick to it. So anyway, just be aware of that. And I'm one who sticks my hand on the paper a lot, so I'm trying not to today. And so what you can kind of do is just get in your basic shapes first, and then you can kind of come back in and see what lines you want to make thicker if you do. So, and pumpkin shapes are really nice and simple. You can just do like the segments, and it's okay if you make a few little whoops with the pen, because you can go back and change and go over it and not worry about it and make those lines thicker. So, let's see. know this is fascinating watching me go over my lines, but that's okay. So then just kind of assess. I'm going to do, kind of come in here first before I do my outline. I don't know what that line is. Anyway. So I'm going to kind of thicken up a few lines and let you know where you actually have a little overlap here. Then you can kind of come in and then I like having a nice outline, and I like to have kind of an organic line going down here. And so the image is going to kind of come past here. And then I'll kind of, spin this around. And you certainly don't have to have an outline or frame it in. That's just something that I like. And, you know, they're not straight at all, which is kind of what I think is, more interesting anyway. To me, but do whatever you feel like. So, okay. And then right in here, I'm going to kind of make this a little bit heavier. And then just going to see. And then I'm sorry I'm making you dizzy spinning this around, but I'd rather not get my hand in there, so. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to do this one. Okay. And now one of the things I want to tell you about the heat gun. A heat gun is definitely not a hairdryer. The heat gun gets really hot so that it makes the embossing powder have a chemical reaction and then change to, metallic looking silver. But you just want to be really careful with it, and so you want to make sure that wherever you're using your heat gun, you don't have things around it that can actually melt, and make sure you be careful with your hands. You can actually burn your skin off, so just be aware of that. So I'm not sure what this line is, but we don't have to put anything there. All right, let's see. Now, I think that looks okay. I'm just going to go over a few things. And you want to make sure your lines are nice and solid. So if they look like they're a little see-through, you want to make sure you go over them. This is a new pen, so I'm not really having that issue. Okay. I just keep making my lines fatter and fatter, so that's fine. I'm just going to come out here and make this one nice and heavy. Okay. And you can just kind of have fun with it. You can have some fat and some thin lines, just whatever strikes your fancy. Okay. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to come in here and get the embossing powder. And I like to have another piece of paper. I think I've got a couple of pieces of construction paper that I use because it's a little bit thicker, just to kind of catch everything. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is take this. Then I've got the embossing powder. I'll scooch all this stuff over here. Okay. And then it's going to be like, kind of like if you're putting glitter on glue, okay? You don't have to dump the whole container on there, but you want to make sure you have plenty, because you can always put this back in the container. So we're just going to kind of bounce it around like you do if you were putting glitter on something. And you want to make sure that you see that it's covering really well. Okay. Oop, there we go. Okay. And you can kind of tell where you can kind of tap the paper. And what you can do is if you have a few that are just sticking there, you can take a dry brush and kind of come in here and brush it off, because that will actually, when the heat gun hits it, it'll turn it silver and then you won't be able to get it off. So kind of look at your page or look at your image and see if you've got everything the way you like it. And then there's still a few things in here. I'm going to kind of loosen them up. And you can a lot of times tap the paper, but if you have little stubborn spots, then use a dry brush. Okay, now we're going to move this stuff out of the way. And I like to use the heat gun on low. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, yeah, thank you. Now I can see right here, there's a little bit that I missed. So if you have a little area that you think you've missed, then go ahead and put it back on there. Okay. And then I'll just take it over here and tap it off. All right. Now, definitely hold it away from you. We're going to do this at... All right. We just want to do this on low. And you don't have to get very close to the paper, but you do want to, and sometimes, depending on your heat gun, some of them like it better if you're holding it still. I personally kind of like to move it around some. And you'll be able to tell when it starts actually changing. You can see it starts getting really kind of silvery and metallic. Now, you want to make sure you don't get your hands under there or your fingers. And I put a piece of masonite down, so whatever surface you're using your heat gun on, make sure you're not doing it on something that's vinyl or anything that could actually easily melt. Okay, so just be aware of that. And you can accidentally, really kind of burn the paper, so you want to keep moving your heat gun around, and you can see how it actually starts to change and looks really pretty and sparkly. It's kind of magical. And also the nice thing about embossing is that it becomes a resist to your watercolor. So you can actually paint on top of it and it'll resist your paint. So that's actually kind of nice too. So you want to go around and make sure you get all these little, get it all heated up and changed. And then there may be a few places that, and sometimes you can see a little bit of the pen behind it. That's kind of why I like to use the clear pen, because sometimes you can actually see the watercolor. I mean, not the pen through it. So anyway, let's see. Okay. So the music decided to die, but that's all right. So now what we're going to do. All right, so we're ready for painting. And now you get to do this however you like. We can do color blending because, stained glass, some have different nice color blends, or you can do very specific color segments. Just really kind of have fun with it, but have an idea of how you want to do it before you start. And then I've wet some of the paints. So what I want to do also is I'm going to use yellow as part of my underpainting in here, because by having this yellow underneath, it'll make my orange even brighter. And then, so I'm going to add some of this. And now remember that the embossing, the silver is actually going to resist the paint, so it's okay. You can actually paint over it. You don't have to really paint in the segments, but I'm just doing it. But see, my brush can run over it, and voila, it's still silver. Pretty magical. So now I'm going to add some orange in it, and probably should have waited a little bit, but just kind of play around with it. And you can use some, if you want a little bit darker orange, or you can go, wow, I just made my pumpkin a really kind of funky looking color. Just add some more orange to it. Now, depending on what kind of watercolor you're using, you can kind of keep it pretty light. We're going to keep it kind of pretty transparent, translucent today, because that's kind of what stained glass is about. So you can add some more yellow back into this orange if you don't really like how it's coming out. And it's still going to kind of create an orange but, oops. And then as you know, if you kind of get outside the lines, no big deal, just kind of use clear water to kind of pull it up. Okay. All right, so what you can do is if you want, go ahead and add a little bit of other orange in here. Let's see what this one will do. It's kind of a reddish orange, no problem. And when you're color blending, you, as you know, just kind of keep going quickly. And look, I just put paint right where I took it off. No big. That's fine. We'll just keep going. So, but I'm still trying to keep it really pretty light. And then it'll also dry a little bit lighter. And let's see if I can get this a little bit up while it's still wet. Good to go now. And you can also, you know, pretend that these are gourds. You know, gourds are yellow, and I've seen some probably kind of yellowish pumpkins. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to keep these a little bit on the lighter side. But you feel free to do it however you like. And we can just get a base color in here anyway, and then you can kind of, once it dries, kind of come back and see. But I like having a little bit of variation of color, but stained glass is also pretty cool, and some of them are just really nice, and you have a nice solid color, but in trying to keep it a little translucent-y like glass, it's nice to have a little bit of variation. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and, since I'm working with oranges and already for the pumpkins, I'm going to go ahead and do the other pumpkin. So I'm starting on the inside and working my way out. And, you know, if I accidentally get a little bit on the stem, that's okay, because I'm going to do that kind of a brownish color. So I'm just doing this pumpkin kind of in the similar way that I did the other one. Kind of getting some yellow down, because I wanted to have a little bit lighter looking orangey pumpkin. And you can also do that with the leaves too. If you want kind of a more lime green, you can put yellow down first before you do your green. And so let's use a little bit of this here, a little of this one. Just kind of bounce them around here. And this is, you know, this is a really good way to just kind of experiment, you know, just keep, the more you do these kinds of things, the more comfortable you'll get blending color and just trying different things. And just move the brush in different ways, but then just, like I said, don't worry about staying in the segments. You can go right across the silver. But you want to make sure you're keeping your watercolor pretty watery, because if you do get it really thick, it will sometimes sit on top of the silver, so just be aware of that. But the thing you can do though is you can go back in with a brush and water and take some of the paint off of the silver, so you can do that. So because when you're color blending, you want to kind of blend all of the colors quickly and then let it sit, and then you can adjust them later. But you can add to it, you can make them darker, but you can't really make them lighter, so you want to kind of move that around and make sure the color gets everywhere you want it. Okay, let's see. And then the way I like to work is I like to work in lighter colors and then darker colors. So I'm going to go into the leaves, and so I want to do these a little differently and have kind of a limey green side and a darker green side. So I'm going to add, like I was saying, this yellow there, and then I'm going to add the light green on top, but it'll make it even lighter and a little limier because the yellow's under there. And I am keeping them segmented this time because I want the one half to be darker green. than the other. And I'll do this over here, but since I have some of that lime green already on my brush, I'm just going to bring it over here. And then, oops, that's fine. Since these are pretty wet, I'm just going to take some of this paint and pop it over here. And I meant to do it in the other one, but that's okay. But the nice thing is, if I went, oh man, I meant to do it over here, then just do it over here. And then you'll just add the dark green on top of the other one. Okay. So, now we'll do some dark green here. So we can have a bit of contrast here. You know, and I just want to make sure that if you're trying to keep everything pretty translucent, you can still have a nice dark color, but just don't have to be super, super solid. So just kind of keep moving it around and blotting it off a little bit so that it's not just really pasty solid. Okay. Now you can if you want to. I'm trying to do this a little bit lighter than just a solid dark bit. So then remember we were going to do this one over here, the dark green. And so we may need to come back over this one and do it, but you know, maybe not. So we're just going to leave it like this. And if you think that a little bit of the green is a little dark, then don't worry about it here. And just kind of make sure you get up over your edges here. Alright. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to do a little stem. Now, I like using some brown, but the brown gets dark super fast. So, use brown and just kind of move it around so it's really light. Okay, see how dark that is? Then you can I just will blot it off on the paper towel and then even add some water to it and then just kind of keep going. I just wanted to keep it nice and light. And it's always a good idea to kind of blot, to test your colors on your paper towel to see how dark or light they are. So if it's like super dark, then you want to blot it off or add more to it. So now to keep this brown from seeming flat, I'm going to add a little bit of gold in it. Kind of a golden brown. Mix it right in there with the brown. And then I'm going to just kind of add a little water and take some of it off. And then we may want to just add some nice dark brown later to have more contrast. So, and that's okay too, but I'm just trying to get everything with a bit of a color on it right now. Okay. Now we're going to add the background, and I'm going to use some kind of periwinkly purpley blue. This is super dark, so I'm going to make sure. So I'm going to add a little bit of purple in here too, because I kind of like that idea of having purple and the blue together. Oop. They blend nicely, but then you want to make sure that if you get a lot of water on there, you move it around and blot it off so that it doesn't actually accidentally get in the place you don't want it. So, add a little more blue down here. Add a little more purple. I'm just going to see how the color pools. So I'm just trying to blend them pretty quickly so that they add a little bit of water. And then the nice thing too is once this dries, then you can kind of see what the color looks like, and then you can come back in and add more blue or purple wherever you want it. Okay. So you can see how it kind of blends a little differently in each place, which is kind of cool. I like that, but you know, you can, and you know, if it gets really kind of thick and weird in certain spots, you can certainly blot it with the paper towel, or oh, I just got it in the pumpkin, but then I'll hurry up and do this because you know, blue and purple are some of the darker colors, so it's harder to get up, and like this seems a little bit heavy in here, so I'm just kind of blotting with most all of the color off and just getting it just wet. And then, so I wanted to show you, this is the other one that I've done, and this is, you know, with the squirrel and leaves. Now since this one is a little, the image is not really complicated, but sometimes, you know, once everything is silver and white, it's kind of hard to differentiate between what your shapes are supposed to be and where. So what I recommend is make sure you go ahead and go in and use a light layer of your color, you know, so you know where the sky is and what you want to have green and where you want your, you know, your branch to be and the acorn, just to kind of get a light base so that you remember what you wanted everything to be, so that when you're not, you know, you're working on this and then you go, oh, what color is that supposed to be? So this is just to help you out in the long run. So if you get a nice little light base coat, then you can not worry about it, and then when you can come back and add a little darker colors, then you know that this is supposed to be the sky and not part of the leaf, or you know, whatever. So I'm doing a gray squirrel, so what I want to do is just kind of really, same thing, do really light, even though it looks really dark. I'm just going to add a lot of water. So I just want to get a nice light gray, and I'll just move this around the whole squirrel. And you know, as with everything else, just I like to use a little circular motion when I'm doing it, just because the squirrel is a 3D, well, rounded little character. And then this way he has this nice little base coat, and that I can go back in and add darker to later, but just adding a lot of water right now. Because it's always nice just to have a little under layer of painting. And then you can go back in and add some darker color for more contrast. Or not, you know, you can keep it all really nice and light and airy if you want. It's totally up to you. But it's nice to have some contrast with the silver lines. So, okay, I'm just going to add a little more in here. And then remember, it will resist it, so you just kind of can roll over it and just spread it all out. Okay. So this way you have all of your shades, and then you can kind of go back, and once you've let some stuff dry a little bit, you can, you know, add some deeper reds. Oops, that's not even, yeah. So you can go in and, like on the leaves leaves of the other one. You can kind of come in, we can do a darker side here if you want to. We can even add some kind of red orange here to the other sides. It's kind of fallish. Oop, hello, that's a little dark, so we'll go in and take some of that off. And if you don't like it, then just really kind of thin it back in. So and we'll add some more red here. Or you can do something where you add, you know, some darker color down in the base or down in lower parts, and then come up and kind of fan it out so it softens out, but you have this nice deeper bit of red here. And that as it goes up to the top. It's just really what you kind of want to do. And then even later when this dries again, you can still kind of come back in with even darker red again. So, and let's see, I'll use some brown here on the little top of the acorn. I like to have that golden brown underneath there first, and then we're just gonna do a little bit of brown, light brown here on the top of it. But you get the idea, and then if you want, you can add some darker blues or some darker greens, you know, same kind of thing. Just gonna blend it in, but have a little bit of so we're still trying, you know, keeping it a little translucent, but it's still darker, that this is darker. But, okay. So, and just remember, and you know, and then you'll just keep going until you finish this, you know, get all of the colors the way you want them, and blend your edges in just to make sure so that, you know, once these dry, it'll have a hard edge, so you want to make sure that you kind of blend it in so you don't have that line unless you want it. Okay? So, break down your shapes simply. Look at some stained glass references if you want to. And then just layer in your colors, you know, really lightly, and then slowly add up. And then just be careful when you're using your embossing powder. Just make sure when you're using the heat gun that you have a surface that's not, you know, that won't get too hot or won't melt. Key right there. And just take your time and kind of enjoy doing something a little different. And I look forward to seeing them when you guys are finished, and we'll see you next time.